Hey folks, every summer it's hard to decide what kind of vacation do you want to take. Do you want a relaxing natural getaway or do you want a new cultural artistic experience? Luckily this summer you don't have to choose. The Williamstown Theater Festival runs July 17th to August 3rd among the beautiful Berkshire Mountains in northwestern Massachusetts. It brings over 130 artists to the stage for nearly 100 performances. Discounted hotel rooms are available now. Go to WTFestival.org and immerse yourself in theater this summer. That's WTFestival.org. Today on CityCast DC, do you feel like you're hearing a lot lately about floods in DC? You're not alone. In fact, a lot of our city sits atop what used to be a bunch of creeks and streams. Charlotte Taylor Fryar wrote a whole book about Washington and water. It's called Potomac Fever. Charlotte is here to explain the water that sits beneath your sidewalk. Today is Thursday, May 15th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC's talking about. Hey, Charlotte.
Hey, so good to speak with you.
Thank you for being here. So we hear a lot about how DC's a swamp, but I think that's actually scientifically not the case. And in your work, you talk a lot about it being, or large parts of it being, a floodplain. What does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that I think, like, we living in the city, like, we know this, but we certainly don't think about it, is that our city is at the confluence of two major rivers, the Potomac and the Anacostia. And certainly sections of the city are situated on a floodplain, areas that are sort of low-lying along the edge of the river. More in Northwest, you have the higher hills, but as you move east across the city towards the Anacostia, you do have more of the sort of floodplains. And connecting these two rivers are vast networks of creeks. There are hundreds of creeks in Washington, D.C. And we, hopefully we'll talk a little bit about why some of those can be seen, the biggest one perhaps being Rock Creek, and then others are buried underground and cannot be seen. But our city is built on the bones of hundreds of creeks and streams and little trickling waterways, some of which potentially closer to the Potomac might have what could be called a swampy feel, but probably more like a wetland feel if we're talking biology class.
So there have been a few high-profile floods in D.C. over the past few years, and sort of anyone who's got a basement also knows the trepidation of looking down there after a big thunderstorm. The most famous and horrible of these floods was probably the one where doggy daycare, District Dogs, flooded a couple summers ago. So now we're entering flood season, and I realize I've lived here most of my life, but I don't know the answer to this question. Why is D.C. so particularly prone to flooding?
Yeah, well, D.C. really faces issues from two different kinds of flooding. There's riverine flooding, which sounds like what it sounds like. It's the kind of flooding that happens along the river. And then there's more interior urban flooding, which is what happened with the District Dogs situation. I guess to begin with the riverine flooding, part of what causes the flooding along the Potomac River, I guess, is two things. Further south down the city, this is closer towards the Wharf or Navy Yard, along the Anacostia, the Potomac is a tidal river. And so some of the flooding that we'll get in Navy Yard, and certainly when, for example, Old Town Alexandria will often flood. Almost, it feels like every month or two these days, the water will come up pretty high along the park there in Old Town Alexandria. That's tidal flooding, which is a regular and sort of cyclical thing. There's also sort of upriver flooding. Our city is a little bit south of this area called the Potomac Gorge, which is this high gorge. This is sort of the section between Great Falls and Little Falls. And because it's a high concentrated channel where water will rush through, it's very susceptible to like high rising water. And we have had over the history of the district, certainly over the last 100 years, several major, they're called 100-year floods, even though they happen more often than 100 years, that have caused really significant river flooding when water rushes through this channel and rushes down the city. So that's one kind of major flooding, is that riverine flooding. The urban flooding that you are talking about with the horrible District Dog situation and the flooding of all of the English basements across the city is a result of largely buried streams that, again, in the 20th century, most of these were sort of channeled up. They were added to Washington, D.C.'s sort of sewer system for the most part. And sometimes the sewer system will be sort of like overfilled with the water. Water also cannot seep into the groundwater, and you end up with flooding situations, particularly in places where water and streams used to move through.
So we know, obviously, the riverine flooding, the most dangerous places to be by the river. But for this urban flooding, what parts of town are most susceptible to it?
The two largest creeks in the district, one is Rock Creek Park, and that obviously is a park. The other is this creek called Tiber Creek. Its headwaters are up at the old soldiers' home, far up in sort of along Rock Creek Park. Yeah, Rock Creek Church, that sort of area, very high north. But as you move further down the city, Tiber Creek was as large as Rock Creek. So if you can imagine like how large Rock Creek is, Tiber Creek was as large. And really the places that are most susceptible to flooding are places along the path of that creek and some of its sort of other tributaries. Again, these are places that the creek has largely been buried underground, but there are times when either the sewer system is overflowed or the groundwater in certain areas cannot hold the amount of water that's being dropped from the sky whenever it's raining. So really, it's along some of the old paths of that creek. One of those places is this old area sort of near Union Market, which is called Swamp Poodle, where the Swamp Poodle Dog Park is. It's a historic neighborhood not too far from where the district dogs flooding situation happened. And that area is one of the places where Tiber Creek, from where it sort of descended down through the city, it's where it sort of pooled out into a more sort of wetland area historically. And that sort of area right there, I think it's on New York Avenue, was a place where the Tiber was at one point, before it was sort of buried, channeled underground in the early 20th century. It used to be, I think, 10 or 12 feet wide. Kids used to go swimming in it. It was like a local swimming hole 150 years ago. And so you can imagine when that amount of water is placed into a small channel, a sewer system, there will still be places where water wants to go. And that's some of the places where we get historic flooding.
So what time of year is worst for flooding?
Usually it will be in the spring, but I'm not sure there's always a worse time of year. There have certainly been floods that happen through the summer when we'll have those, those great summer thunderstorms and those big downpours. But we've also seen in the city some of the worst flooding actually in the sort of winter. This is sort of periods of sort of late winter, early spring rains mixed with snow that'll be melting up from the more northern reaches of the river. And those things in combination can certainly happen. But I would say spring, summer.
If you've never visited the Folger Shakespeare Theater, now is the time. It's showing the Shakespearean classic Twelfth Night, but with a groundbreaking modern twist that brings pure joy. This is not the Shakespeare that you fell asleep reading in 10th grade. It is a contemporary, sexy production of Shakespeare's great comedy. Sure, there's loss, love, and identity, but there's also a sense of discovery, lavish costumes, and great modern music. The director used the term elegant kink while describing it to me, so you already know you're in for a ride. Think She's the Man meets RuPaul's Drag Race. Performances start on May 13th and run through June 22nd, and tickets are going fast. Don't wait. Go to folger.edu/12th night to purchase tickets. That's folger.edu/1, 2, night.
Hi, I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast. We've all set health goals: lose weight, exercise more, eat better. But without a plan, those goals often fade. That may have happened to you. It has definitely happened to me. And that's where Prolon comes in. Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet gives you a science-backed, structured approach to stay on track and see real results. And now Prolon is upping their game with the new next-gen 5-day program, delivering the same science-backed benefits in a cleaner, more convenient, and more flavorful format. Prolon is a plant-based nutrition program featuring soups, snacks, and beverages designed to nourish the body while keeping it in a fasting state, triggering cellular rejuvenation and renewal. Next Gen builds on the original Prolon with 100% organic soups and teas, a richer taste, and ready-to-eat meals. Developed over decades at USC's Longevity Institute and backed by top U.S. medical centers, Prolon has been shown to support biological age reduction, metabolic health, skin appearance, fat loss, and energy. I've been doing the 5-day program, and I feel so much better. I really enjoy the tasty energy bars, the snacks and soups, and the fact that I can enjoy meals, even though the calorie count is super low. The flavors and textures are excellent. An olive oil snack here, broccoli and quinoa soup there, hibiscus tea, a yummy nut bar. It's got the benefits of a 5-day fast, but doesn't have the challenge of doing it with pure liquids. It's a system reset. And also, I know this sounds funny, but it's not. The packaging and directions are fantastic, clear, and well-organized and thoughtful. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolon is offering CityCast listeners 15% off site-wide, plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/city. That's PROLONLIFE.com/city to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/city. This episode of CityCast is sponsored by Babbel. Learning a new language opens the door to new friends, new cultures, maybe even a whole new life. So why not start the journey today with Babbel? You can start speaking a new language with confidence thanks to Babbel's conversation-based technique. It quickly teaches you useful words and phrases about the things you actually talk about in the real world. There are more than a dozen languages available for you to learn at your own pace, with material tailored to your individual proficiency level, interests, and time availability. I'm David Plotz, CEO of CityCast, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel and brushing up a teeny bit on my French. But there's also Turkish, Swedish, Dutch, German, many more languages. Babbel's tips and tools for learning a new language are approachable and accessible. It's like having a private tutor in your pocket. I particularly love Babbel's guided conversations, which let me practice real-world conversations. What to say at the doctor's office, how to leave a party, using speech recognition to make sure I'm getting the pronunciation right. Babbel's mobile app and website have real-time feedback, progress trackers, and clear visualizations that are helping me improve my Spanish in only 10 minutes a day. So get talking with Babbel. I want you to learn another language, so I'm teaming up with Babbel to gift you 55% off subscriptions, but only for CityCast listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Babbel.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So I got to ask, because it's in the news right now, DC is talking about a very big project, a stadium and a bunch of housing and neighborhood stuff around there, right on the banks of the Anacostia. Is that, from a flood point of view, a safe spot to be doing stuff?
Potentially. I will say one of the neighborhoods that has been experiencing some of the worst flooding in, I guess, more recent times is this smaller neighborhood called Capitol View, which is over there along the Anacostia. It's also sort of a neighborhood, it's on sort of the eastern edge of the city. And that's a place that's experienced a lot of sort of groundwater flooding because it is so low lying and because that area has been built up significantly with sort of concrete and asphalt. There's not a lot of soil for the water to be able to actually permeate. And certainly with the construction of RFK, reconstruction, I guess, of RFK and areas along there, I mean, you think about just the expanse of parking lots, the vast expanse of parking lots. That's all areas that, right now, at least, it's very hard for falling water to be able to actually be absorbed into the groundwater there. There are, possible mitigation factors, which we can certainly talk about, but there are ways to design places like that.
Like what kind of thing could they do?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things that have already been started or begun in the district. One is certainly what's called daylighting of streams, so that for these streams that have been buried underground and there's housing development over the bones of these old creeks, there are places where it's possible to bring these streams into the daylight. Again, it's called daylighting the streams, that certainly mitigates that flooding because you don't have water flowing through this tiny little channel and you have more area for the groundwater to be able to fall and to permeate and to gather in one place. There's also lots of possibilities for sort of green infrastructure. And this could include sort of the creation of rain gardens and little bioretention areas for stormwater runoff, the construction of certain permeable pavements where rain actually can fall. This is like porous asphalt and porous concrete rather than, I guess, the old school stuff, which wasn't porous. Green roof development, which is certainly something that I have seen across the city. And I will say, too, increasing the number of trees that are planted throughout the city has a tremendous impact on promoting the infiltration of groundwater across the city.
So one of the cool things about your work is, look, I'm a city kid. I'm from DC. I walk along New York Avenue and I think like I am on a street with a sidewalk and there's a cross street there and this is the neighborhood. But, you sort of paint this picture of if we went back in time, like 500 years, we'd be in this patchwork of streams and rivulets and stuff that don't even exist anymore. Or at least we don't think they exist because they're underground. So I'm also fascinated with some of the big infrastructure here. The city just broke ground on this Potomac River tunnel, like a tunnel for water under the river. How is that supposed to mitigate flooding?
Yeah, well, it's really supposed to, I think for that case, for the Potomac River Tunnel, it's supposed to mitigate the amount of overflow out of the sewer system into the river, which will certainly help with the sort of health of the river itself.
But how does it get to the tunnel, the water?
Yeah, it's through that whole network of sort of sewers and channels and tunnels underground. Some of that will go directly through sort of DC water. But when there's like an overflow and the water systems can't like hold it all, it will flow directly into the river. And the DC River Tunnel that you're talking about is designed to help raise the amount of water that sewer system like can hold so that you don't have that mix of groundwater and sewer like going directly into the river.
So as I understand it, there was a similar thing under the Anacostia a few years ago. Has that actually... I mean, it was a huge, huge infrastructure project. Has that actually led to less flooding?
So the Anacostia River Tunnel was completed in September of 2023, and it is a 13.1 mile tunnel that is supposed to sort of capture, it says 15 billion gallons of combined sewage and more than 9,000 tons of trash. That kind of overflow that those tunnels are capturing would otherwise be released untreated into the Anacostia River. And so the Potomac River Tunnel is supposed to do something very similar. But it also, you got to imagine it takes like how long it takes to build a 13.1 mile long tunnel. And that tunnel was sort of it like cuts across the Anacostia. So it took a long time to construct it. And the Potomac River one would certainly be a similar kind of a project to undertake.
Yeah, it's supposed to be done by 2030. So that's a long, long project.
I would say it's going to be 2035. We'll see.
But wait, so these streams that used to exist that got covered up and that you think maybe ought to be daylighted, like literally, like how did they get covered up? It just was like there was a creek there, and some engineer was like, "All right, we're going to build a road." Like, is that what happened, or did they put it into like pipes?
They really put them into pipes. Well, I'll say this: I think like when we say creek, I think maybe folks are imagining a creek the size of Rock Creek. A lot of these creeks are more like those thin little streams and trickles. There are these wonderful maps, there's wonderful sort of historic maps that you can check out actually on the DC Department of Energy and Environment that have sort of these old traces of what these little creeks used to look like. And these are the kinds of waterways that in the summer, they might even dry up during periods of drought or something like that. But when it does rain and when water is flowing, they will reach a certain sizable size. So we're talking about streams and creeks, maybe not the size of Rock Creek, but they still sort of hold an important geographical legacy and feature of being able to gather and hold water when it does fall. So a lot of these, some of them were sort of tunneled up, put into channels, especially as the city began to sort of develop like northward when some of, most of our largest neighborhoods where folks live, this is like everything above sort of Florida Avenue, really. When those neighborhoods were really constructed and built before and sort of after the turn of the 20th century, some of them were channeled up, put down into the sewer system, which was still like such an exciting newfangled thing to be adding to your major metropolitan city. And some of them, they really were just built over these small sort of creeks and areas because they weren't necessarily seen. The idea was that there were other ways that you could possibly divert water.
So if I wanted to undivert them now in the name of more flood prevention, I assume it's a little more complicated than just taking a pickaxe and digging through the earth for a while.
Definitely so. Some of them are, like I said, some of them are small and would be certainly hard to do. But there have been successful examples of the daylighting of urban streams. There was a section of Broad Branch that was daylighted, I believe, in 2016. And it took about only 6 months to actually complete the daylighting of a 1,600-foot section. So this isn't tremendously long, but still sort of really important section of this creek.
So that's my neighborhood, but what did it do to the neighborhood? How did it change either the flood situation or anything else, for that matter?
Yeah, it was supposed to help with sort of stormwater management. I don't know enough about the particulars of that neighborhood, where it would have sort of excavated out the stream channel. I'm sure it would have also installed erosion and sediment controls. This is also sort of a major issue with flooding around these streams. As you're like walking around the city, you'll sometimes see those stormwater drains and it'll say like, do not pollute. This flows into the Anacostia River. This flows into Rock Creek. This flows into the Potomac. And think about all of the trash and all of the leaves and all the things that go down those drains that you might see just sort of walking around the city. With the daylighting of urban streams, there's less of a threat, perhaps, of sort of that kind of sediment blockage that can happen in those sewer systems underground that can be hard to do. So one of the benefits of daylighting of streams is that they'll have more sort of erosion control and sediment control. When rain falls, you're able to actually capture that, and there's less of a threat of sort of blockages underground.
All right, so I don't think it's within my power to daylight a stream, but what can like a regular person do when it comes to preventing flooding on an individual level?
Totally. So as I mentioned before, I think green infrastructure, I think people think these are small things, but especially if you're living in one of those neighborhoods where you know you're living, and you can look at maps that, again, that the DC Department of Energy and Environment have put together, and you can check out your neighborhood and you can see whether or not, it does get kind of wet on this corner or on this little park, and you can check out whether or not you are living really close to one of the old paths of one of these creeks. Especially for small areas like that, green infrastructure is so important. As I mentioned before, like the creation of rain gardens and bioretention, these are sort of those shallow landscaped depressions that are designed to capture, filter stormwater runoff, particularly from surfaces where the water cannot permeate. This is like roofs and sidewalks and streets and stuff. Those really help. Certain planting trees is a huge way in which trees obviously intercept rainfall. They increase the transpiration possibilities, and they also just promote the infiltration of water into the soil. We already have a pretty tree-heavy city, but more won't hurt. I would say, too, permeable pavements. If you are ever going to be in a situation where you are considering concrete or stone, choose like stones every single time, or use porous asphalt or any kind of permeable surface where water can actually permeate the soil.
Hey, Charlotte, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And before we go, I want to say a quick thank you to our new members, Michael B., Marianne S., and Joan C. If you want a shout out too, as well as ad-free listening and other perks, become a member for just $10 a month at membership.citycast.fm. And that's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe. For goodness sakes, subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.